moving on to IndyCar. The IndyCar Championship was crowned on Sunday, the 2022 IndyCar champion. We finally know who that is coming up. We finally know who that is, after a crazy, long, amazing season. Since we last checked in on the IndyCar series, it was all the way back in July, right? It was in July, the races at Indy. You had the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix back at Nashville. Scott McLaughlin started P1 in that race. He led the first 22 laps. Elio Castroneves spins on lap 22 to bring out the second yellow of the day. A lap after the restart for that caution on lap 26, Graham Rahal, Pato O'Ward, and a slew of others are involved in an incident in turn 7. Lap 64, David Malukas and Kyle Kirkwood are involved in a crash in turn 9. Meanwhile, Scott Dixon takes the lead on lap 66 with Joseph Newgarden pitting for fuel. The 8th caution comes out at lap 76 for Romain Grosjean. He had a wreck, and then there was a restart with 2 laps to go. Scott Dixon holds off Scott McLaughlin at the line to win his 53rd race of his career, putting him into sole possession of second place all time. Alex Palou was 3rd. Alexander Rossi was 4th. Colton Herta was 5th. Then you had the Bomarito Automotive Group 500. Will Power started P1, led 128 of 260 laps. Jack Harvey crashes to bring out the race's first yellow at lap 145. Joseph Newgarden takes the lead for the first time on lap 165. There were drivers keeping their eye on the radar for sure. And then at lap 215, they got their wish as there was a caution that comes out for rain. The race was red flagged at lap 217. David Malukas in the lead. Joseph Newgarden takes the lead on lap 225 and doesn't look back. He led 78 laps. David Malukas was 2nd. Scott McLaughlin was 3rd. Pato O'Ward was 4th. Takuma Sato rounded out the top 5. Then you had the Grand Prix of Portland. Scott McLaughlin started P1. He dominated, leading 104 of 110 laps. He really only surrendered the lead during green flag pit stops. He scores his 3rd win of the season. Will Power was 2nd. Scott Dixon was 3rd. Pato O'Ward was 4th. And Graham Rahal makes up the top 5. So heading into the final race, the point standings look like this. Will Power was in the lead. Joseph Newgarden was behind by 20 points, as was Scott Dixon. Marcus Ericsson was 4th, minus 39 points back, and Scott McLaughlin was 41 points back. And so it looked like it was shaping up really well for Will Power because Joseph Newgarden, the closest guy behind him, has a little bit of an incident in qualifying. He has to start way back in the field for the Firestone Grand Prix of Monterey. On the other end of that spectrum, Will Power earns his 68th P1 award, and then he would go on to lead the race's first 15 laps. Dixon and Ericsson pit on lap 10 under green to get on a different pit strategy. Pit strategy, obviously, like it does in a lot of races, played a big factor in this one. Callum Ilott brings out the first yellow, stalling on lap 38. Points with 40 laps left saw Power leading Newgarden by just 17 points. They were running 2nd and 3rd. Newgarden pits at lap 61 from 2nd place. The points with 25 laps left was Will Power leading with Newgarden minus 6 back after bonus points. It looked like Newgarden was maybe going to finish this off and get the win. Below pits, Newgarden, it was out in front on lap 71 with still one pit stop left to go. Newgarden would pit on lap 74. He comes back out in 2nd ahead of Will Power, 16 points back. As far as the race itself was concerned, Alex Palou dominated. He wins by 30-plus seconds, just an insane win by Alex Palou. He led 67 of 95 laps. Joseph Newgarden finishes 2nd. Will Power 3rd. Felix Rosenqvist 4th. Christian Lundgaard makes up the top 5. So, that means that Will Power earns his 2nd IndyCar title over Joseph Newgarden, the last title for Power coming in 2014. And the numbers for Will Power, you wonder, you wouldn't have thought it, coming into the season, and it doesn't really surprise you when a guy like Will Power wins the championship, but just looking at how he did it and wondering, this is the most impressive run we've seen over the past 4 or 5 years or so. Will Power finished 9 of 17 races on the podium. His lone win came at Detroit, so that's pretty crazy to think about. He had 4 poles, no DNFs. He led at least 1 lap in 10 of 17 races. He led the most laps at Detroit and St. Louis. And so, I mean, you look at some of the other drivers. I mean, you had, going back 5 years, you've got Scott Dixon in 2018. He had one pole, 3 wins, 9 podiums. He led the most laps in all three of his wins. You've got Joseph Newgarden in 2019. He had 3 P1s, 4 wins, 7 podiums, led 11 races, the most laps at St. Pete, Detroit, and Iowa with one DNF. So aside from the lone DNF, that's probably the most impressive season. Because then you look at 2020 with Scott Dixon. He had 4 wins, 7 podiums, led 6 races, the most laps at Texas and Indy. Now, granted, that was a shortened season, kind of a wonky season. And then you've got which take nothing away from Scott Dixon. I'm just saying that that's impressive, but it was a very shortened season, so actually probably makes it even more impressive, to be honest. Then you had Alex Palou last season. He had 2 wins, 2 P1s, 3 wins, 8 podiums, led 8 races, leading the most laps at St. Pete with 2 DNFs. So it's pretty insane. I would venture to say that Newgarden, his 2019 was the most impressive of those. But I mean, looking at the last 3 champions, I mean, to think of a driver, not only winning, I mean, because the thing that stands out is the fact that he only won one race. Because you actually have to go back to 1996, 1997, that weird year where they were like, do we want to have a season that starts in August and ends the following year? Let's do that. But yeah, that would be the last time you had a driver win the championship with just one win. That's Tony Stewart, 1996, 1997. Tony Stewart won the championship in 1996, winning one race. Then would go on to have an entire crazy, awesome IndyCar or NASCAR career, then transfer into NASCAR ownership before the next time we would see another driver win the title with just one win. That's insane to me. That's nuts. So that in and of itself makes it incredible. I mean, there was just 10 races on the IndyCar series for that 1996-1997 season, but I mean, it's insane to think that over a 17-race span, Will Power was so dominant that he only needed one win to get the title. He was always on the podium, it seemed like, always leading the race, always winning the pole. It was just an insane run, and it was even better than his 2014 run, where he, even though he did not have, he did not have a DNF, coincidentally the only year that he has not had a DNF in between then, so he didn't have a DNF in 2014, had a DNF in 2015 through 2021, and then didn't have a DNF this year. So I guess if Will Power if he has at least one DNF, go ahead and cancel his shot at the title. But in that season as well, he had 3 wins and 7 podiums. So I think it's more impressive to win a championship with fewer wins than it is, because I guess that's kind of a contradiction, because obviously it's impressive to win a bunch of races, but if you can do it, maybe not more impressive, but as impressive at least, to win a title with only winning one race. That's just boggling to me, because we're in a day and age of like NASCAR and F1. I mean, you see the same drivers win almost all the time, it seems like. So hats off to Will Power. What a run that he had this season. Incredible. I know B. Scott has had his rivalry with with Will Power, but hats off to him. What a great season for Will Power in the NTT IndyCar series. So, and I can't wait until next year. And speaking of next year, let's go ahead before we go here and kind of take a look at at what the season looks like next year, what our thoughts are for next year. And first of all, I want to kind of take a look at the rookies, as far as like who's a rookie that I am excited to watch going into next year. I mean, got Christian Lundgaard, who had a great season. Really, at the end of the year, started to really turn it on. You had David Malukas, who had that great run at the Worldwide Technology Speedway. You have a lot of great rookie performances, but I'm really interested to see what Kyle Kirkwood does next year. I mean, he returns to Andretti Autosport, where he won an Indy Lights title. In that year, in 2021, he had 10 wins and 14 podiums. Now, obviously, he's not going to be that dominant next year, but he's going into a situation where he's familiar with the team, familiar with the technology, and I think it bodes well, especially when we have seen drivers like Scott McLaughlin and Alex Palou thrive in their year 2 after a subpar, rookie campaign. So I'm interested to see how Kyle Kirkwood does. Like I said, Christian Lundgaard turned it on at the end of the year. You had David Malukas. So you're starting to see, it's funny that we talk about Will Power winning the championship this year, because last year I remember our IndyCar wrap-up, was mainly talking about like, oh, it's the changing of the guard, it's the young guns taking over. And while we saw kind of the familiar, old veteran faces, Scott Dixon, Joseph Newgarden, Will Power, the champion. There's also some good highlights from some more young guns at the end of the year too, which I think is really great. And what's crazy to think about too is that you have Will Power, who wins the title. You have Joseph Newgarden, who finishes second. You have Scott McLaughlin, who finishes third, and who finishes fourth. Oh, by the way, that's all three drivers that drive for Penske, all in the top five. So going into next year, I think it's going to be really fun and interesting and exciting to see who's going to be the other team that challenges Penske. I mean, you've got, like I said, you've got Power coming off the title. You've got Newgarden, who had 5 wins this season. He seemed really hungry in his post-race interview. I mean, not that he's going to, say like, oh, you know what, I'm happy with second. Like, he's the type of competitor to want to keep driving. But I think he knows, like, if things didn't go wrong at Iowa, things didn't go, if he didn't have a mishap here or mishap there, might have been him hoisting the trophy. So he's really hungry coming back. You had Scott McLaughlin. Almost said Mike McLaughlin. That's a blast from the past if you're a NASCAR fan. Scott McLaughlin, who had 3 wins, fourth in points, and so Penske's coming back next year with a lot of talent, a lot of force. Like, not that that's any surprise. I mean, we know how good Penske always is. The question is, who's going to challenge them? Will it be Arrow McLaren? They're going to add Alexander Rossi. Pato O'Ward had a solid year. They've said that Felix Rosenquist will be back. Maybe they add Alex Palou. I mean, there's that whole drama going on there. That's a storyline in and of itself, is the lawsuit between Palou and Ganassi, and bringing us to Chip Ganassi. I mean, Scott Dixon is still chasing title number 7. He's experienced his longest streak without a win this year. So, hey, we're talking about veterans kind of turning things around. Remember, Will Power was not very good last year, and he turns it around and turns it into a championship season. Scott Dixon is had a better 22 than Will Power had in 2021. But still, if we're talking about guys who could potentially turn it around and have a championship year, Scott Dixon's definitely up there. You had Marcus Ericsson. He's your Indy 500 winner. You have the ongoing Palou drama. Could it be Andretti Autosport, who still have very capable drivers in Colton Herta and Romain Grosjean? So, and adding Kyle Kirkwood to the mix as well, who's very good in the lights for Andretti Autosport. So there's a lot of firepower, I think, next year, where it makes it very exciting to look at the IndyCar season and be like, hey, last year, you have a guy like Alex Palou who just dominated, coming off of the year prior to that, Scott Dixon being so dominant, and you're like, okay, are we going to kind of see one team kind of dominate? And we kind of saw that early with Scott McLaughlin winning the first week, Joseph Newgarden winning the second week. We're like, okay, maybe the Penske drivers run away with it. And they ultimately did. But there was a lot of drama in the middle, and I think there's a lot that can build off of that going into next year. So it's going to be really interesting because as I pivot to my way too early championship pick, it was hard to make because there's a case you can make for a lot of drivers. You'd have to go. You do have to go back all the way to 2012 to find a driver who's won the championship not from Penske or Ganassi. That's pretty crazy. Ganassi, I think their best shot is, of course, Scott Dixon. I just don't see it out of Marcus Ericsson. I just don't see it. I think he can. I just don't. I haven't seen the results to really say like, hey, I really favor him for a championship. Palou's always going to be in it if he's still there. Over the last 10 years, Dixon hasn't gone more than 3 years without a title. His last year came in 2020. If you're looking for a pick out of the Ganassi camp, I think it is Scott Dixon. As far as Penske goes, I don't see back-to-back titles for Will Power. Scott McLaughlin ended the season with a ton of momentum, 3 podiums and a win, but I think I need to see a little bit more consistency to favor him. And like I said before, Joseph Newgarden is so hungry, dude. He finished second in points for the 3rd straight season. He has finished either first or second in points in 5 of 6 seasons with Penske. It's a toss-up between Newgarden and Dixon for me, but I'm going to go with Joseph Newgarden. I think if I'm picking a champion right now for next year, I'm going with Joseph Newgarden. I don't know. There was something about his post-race interview on Sunday that was like, yeah, he's going to come back with a lot of, vim and vigor, a lot of confidence, a lot of fire to go out and win. And not that he not that, I mean, he's obviously always in contention for a championship, but you give someone like that, that extra edge, that extra chip on their shoulder, I think it's game over. So I think Joseph Newgarden be your 2023 champion. But like I said before, what a fantastic year for IndyCar. It was a lot of fun. I can't wait until St. Pete here in a few months to start off the 2023 season. It's going to be a lot of fun.